130 properties in 2 years that you've acquired. I mean, you must have a very defined acquisition process.
Actually, really blow your mind.
When it comes to the operational expenses, what are you underwriting and what is the actual percentage?
You can tell immediately when somebody's a amateur rookie in this space. This is great, but that might kill the deal.
How do you decide what's the maximum you can invest in renovations and amenities?
So I'll give you a hot take.
Man, what you just shared there is so valuable. All right, welcome everyone to the Hospitality Edge podcast, where we bring together what we think are two sides of the same coin, real estate and hospitality. Today, I'm very excited to have Taylor Jones, head of acquisitions at TechVestor, hospitality expert, property management expert, vacation rental and short-term rental expert, real estate expert as well. Yeah, Taylor, welcome to the show and thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure, man. So Taylor, walk us through the journey that, led you to be currently leading the acquisition efforts at TechVestor.
Yeah, so prior to COVID, I was a lifelong sales guy, various different sales jobs, always chasing different commission, and had a client-facing sales job. And of course, when COVID hit, we weren't allowed to go visit clients. So that put me in a tough spot, as the only way to secure new commission was to go get new contracts. So March and April of 2020 was kind of that like, oh crap moment. And for me, I had all the time in the world and had an itch for real estate. So what I did is started binging YouTube, started looking at bigger pockets, started reading various books, and tried to figure out how I wanted to be involved in real estate. I looked at everything from multifamily. Should I get my realtor's license? Do I want to wholesale? Do I want to flip? And ultimately did come across short-term rentals. Me and my wife have been, users of the platform since 2015. So we've stayed in Airbnbs. I think it was like 28 of them across the country. So we're not unfamiliar with it, but I never looked at the metrics as what if I'm a host and how does it look versus what if I'm a guest? And I started diving in and being like, man, this could be pretty awesome. So we started studying, started looking at where we'd want to go. And me being a lifelong Florida boy, we always would venture up to the North Georgia mountains. It's the first mountain range you're going to hit, if you want to escape the Florida heat. So we wrote 5 offers and then finally got a cabin accepted. So a little crazy, 8 hours away, sight unseen. We went in, bought the cabin, drove up, renovated it for about a week. I worked with some local contractors, did some sweat equity, got it listed. And I remember going to sleep that first night. And after we launched our listing, woke up the next morning, had 6 new bookings, over $4,000, and I was instantly addicted. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And started really sharing and documenting, me and my wife's journey online on social media. And got very fortunate that the CEO of our current fund at TechVestor actually slid into my DMs. So, you might have heard these stories, but yes, they are true. And I reached out and said, hey, we're starting a short-term rental investment portfolio. We're looking to add key members to this team. And, after really, getting to know each other and some back and forth, I decided to jump on board. There was obviously the itch to do it myself, to kind of take, me and my wife's success. We'd bought a couple since that first one and really go, hey, do we want to do this ourselves? But ultimately decided it'd be better to join a team. And, here we are today. I've got TechVestor up and going and cruising very well.
That's amazing, Taylor. Let's take a little bit of a step back. I just want to understand, when you're at this stage where you're looking at multiple real estate asset classes and you're comparing, what you wanted to do with your life, what was it about short-term rentals specifically that made you say, hey, this is the way to go, rather than going with a commercial or multifamily or, something else?
Yeah, I think there's probably been some level of hospitality in my blood. I used to bartend and, serve in the, or in the restaurant industry in college. So that's a lot of hospitality. Is people are coming into your bar, people are coming in and you're serving them and you're providing good guest experience, which ties into hospitality. So, it's probably the first breath of like really understanding customer service, treating people well. The better you treat them, the more money you make, which has a lot of crossovers to hospitality. So did that, and then did sales jobs. And ultimately the sales jobs that I enjoyed the best were the face-to-face ones. And ultimately sales is just the transfer of emotion. It doesn't matter your product, doesn't matter anything else. Sales is the transfer of emotion. And so being able to convey that and do that was really a great passion. And when you started studying short term rentals, it combines obviously the financial side, but with that hospitality. So I think it was just the best of both worlds with what I'd experienced in my own life. I just didn't actually know it.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So on your own, you acquired a couple of properties. Then you're thinking, hey, do I go and launch my own fund? And eventually, you get approached and you join TechVestor. When it comes to you wanting to raise capital on your own and venture yourself out on your own and do your own fund, I would like to know what's something that you know now from the way that TechVestor structures their capital raising efforts and all of that, that you would have done differently. Like, if you had started on your own, what is something you were thinking, hey, this is how I'm gonna do my structure? I don't know if if you got that far in your reflection of starting your own fund that you guys are currently doing differently or better at TechVestor.
I didn't understand the importance of team and putting the right people on the right seats on the bus, which is really something we hone in on. Really thought, hey, you could just kind of throw this together, outsource a lot of it. And what I realized is when you're relying on other people, they just don't care as much as you do. They don't have the same skin in the game. Something I think we do really well at TechVestor is, everybody's bought in and has, that same drive. We're all driving towards the same goal. When I was starting out on my own and looking at potentially doing, my own little small, fundraising for, short-term rentals, I never understood the value of team. And looking back, I would have been definitely let down by just outsourcing, getting third-party help, filling in gaps here and there. And I definitely underestimated the value and the importance of having a good team built around you.
You guys have a very solid team, and a big part of it is actually in-house, right? At TechVestor,
That's correct.
you've gone through outsourcing, and you've gone back to bringing it in-house. Now, when you're starting in a new market, though, when you're opening a new market, because I know you guys are in different states, 100+ properties. How many properties have you acquired till now?
Yeah, in the last 2 years, we've acquired a little over 130.
130 properties. Very, very impressive. So I guess, how do you look at, outsourcing versus keeping things in-house, particularly when you're looking at opening a new market where you might not yet have the economies of scale or the bargaining power, that you might have when you're already more established in a certain market? Do you start outsourcing and then you bring in-house, or do you go in-house since the very beginning?
Yeah, I mean, we try to ultimately paint an honest picture. So if we're coming in and let's just say we're starting on the renovation side, we're talking to local contractors, painters, subs, whoever it might be in that market to renovate the home, we're going to let them know, hey, like we're not just buying one in this market. We're going to buy 5, 10, 20, 50 over the next 5 years. And, really establish that relationship up front so that they know that we're just not another customer. And we could show them our track record. We could show them our history. We could show them exactly what we do so that they can understand, hey, we want to form a partnership with you. We don't want to necessarily, just hire you for a one-off job. And then, designing is done in-house. We use 3D technology such as Matterport to get measurements, renderings, etc., get all the furniture squared away. And then when it comes to the physical operation, the cleaning, the guest turnover, and things like that, that's all standardized, again, using a lot of tech. Now, who cleans the house in Arizona is different than who cleans the house in Florida. But the reporting, the checklist, the photos, the standardization is all the same using a lot of tech on the back end. So for us, we've standardized how things are done. It's just a different physical boots on the ground person. So same thing when the pool is getting cleaned in Arizona versus in Florida versus in Virginia versus Tennessee versus any other market that we're in, there's a different person cleaning the pool. But how it gets reported to us, how it gets logged, how it gets tracked on our back end, and all those standard operating procedures are going to be the same. So that way we could standardize the back end to make it easy on our team to fully remotely operate and manage this entire portfolio.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it's quite smart. Now, what's your investment strategy? Meaning, are you looking at trying to buy turnkey short-term rentals? Are you looking at value add, where you really want to, acquire properties that require a lot of renovation, a lot of improvements? What are you targeting, right? As far as acquisition goes, are you going for the luxury segment, for the mid segment? What's sort of your, investment criteria when it comes to the type of properties that you are trying to acquire, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, we're typically buying value add. It would be nice to buy, turnkey Airbnbs, but what ends up happening is the person selling thinks that it's worth all of King Midas's gold. So it's overpriced. There's no margin left. There's no return capabilities for us. So it's just better for us to buy value add. We don't play in luxury. It's not a space that we want to fit in, doesn't match our thesis. So what we're actually typically buying is a, single family home that, is probably not an Airbnb today. It's in a vacation market or it's zoned for short-term rentals. And then what we're going to
Mm.
do is convert that into a functioning cash flowing short-term rental. High design, elevate the actual property itself, new floors, new paint, new countertops, etc. And then we're going to add all of our amenities for that appropriate market, whether it's, hot tub, fire pit, cornhole, pickleball, basketball, game room, whatever those appropriate amenities are per market, we're going to go in and execute. So that's typically what we're buying for the most part is value add, and it's non-existing product that's not a current short-term rental, but it's in a
Mm.
zoning that allows for it, or it's in a vacation market that allows for it, and we're going to convert it into a operating short-term rental.
Yeah, yeah, and I saw when you were talking on another podcast on, how do you macro go about choosing which markets, you want to go into. You start with regulations, right? So as you said, the zoning or whatever that might be. Then you go into the gross yield, like what are properties worth and how much are they making. But I want to understand when it comes to, the actual piece of saying, hey, you know, I'm paying this amount. This has the potential of earning, this much, but this is how much I have to invest, right, in order to get it there. Is there an average? Is there a rule of thumb that you're looking at in terms of, upfront capex as a percentage of the cost of the property that you aim for, all in? I mean, renovations, amenities, everything needed to really get the property up and going.
Yeah, we start to realize once we've done enough of these, we can see, hey, on average, two bedrooms typically cost this, or a three bedroom costs this, a four bed, a five, a six. Because we offer such a variety within our portfolio, we have two bedrooms all the way up to six bedrooms. Those costs are going to vary. It also depends. Is this a huge half acre backyard that we're going to turn into a resort? Is this more of a, small to medium yard with just some of the basics like swimming pool, fire pit, hot tub, etc.? So we've kind of built out a range that we can continue to reference back to. And what's really great about the density is we can reference similar properties. So if we're looking at this property on 123 Main Street, we may be able to look and say, "Oh, you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of 456 South Street that we already own." So we can go back and look at those numbers and be like, we had to replace the roof there. That was 15 grand. We need to add the pickleball court. That was 20 grand. So you can really get a tight knit idea on what we already spent on a previous project 2 months ago, 3 months ago, 6 months ago, wherever it is, because a
Mhm.
lot of these homes are going to start being very similar when we're buying in the same market, whether that be the square footage, the lot size, the current condition that it's in, which capex items need replaced. So that's the good news about scale is we're starting to have those levers. So we're able to get a really tight estimate on the front end versus just guessing because it's our first one.
But how do you decide what's the maximum you can invest in renovations and amenities? Meaning, you can take the approach of saying, hey, I'm looking at a certain payback period, right? I want to make sure that, you know, my investment is paid back within, X number of months or years. Or, maybe on the multifamily value add space, you might be looking at, hey, I want to make sure that, with my forecasted refinance, 1 year down the line, I can pay back, those renovation costs or whatnot. What is it that you guys use as a rule of thumb, or as a metric, to say, hey, this is the maximum we can invest on top of what we're paying for this property, or even for the price of the property itself? I mean, how do you make those decisions around how much to pay either for the property, or for the actual, renovations as well.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the nuances to short-term rentals compared to traditional commercial real estate, multifamily, industrial, is there is a little bit of art form to this. Is it easy to tell, hey, if I put a $20,000 pickleball court in the backyard, what's my exact ROI? It's really a hard metric because what you have to look at is how many other properties have pickleball courts. What is that differentiating factor? Now, again, a huge reference point we have is we can continue to look back at our own portfolio and our own data and see our top 7 performers all have pickleball courts. There's clearly an ROI that if they're generating 10, 20, $30,000 more above similar properties in the market, well, we would make that trade all day for that $20,000 pickleball court. When it comes
Mhm.
to which amenities are going to make sense, you have to understand what your hold period is. So for us, we're on a target 5-year hold. So at minimum, if you're going to put in a $10,000 amenity, it better generate at least, $2,000 in additional revenue. That's easy. So that way you've had it, fully making that ROI. But obviously some things are harder to measure. I mean, I'll give you an example. One thing we did was we converted the garage into a golf simulator in one of our Florida properties. Now,
Mhm.
again, does anybody else have a golf simulator in that market? Absolutely not. Was it a little bit of, hey, this would be a cool idea? I think it costs us somewhere around 12 to 15 grand to do. But now that it's been up for a year and we look at other similar properties, which we own in that same neighborhood, which some of the comparable properties of same bedroom count, and we're like, man, this listing is doing $15,000 in revenue above anybody else. Now, can we attribute all of that to the golf simulator? No, but we can say, hey, spending that 12 to 15 grand, we got, nearly 100% revenue boost by having that in as a differentiating factor. So for us, that's kind of the balance of looking at data, but also the art form. And I think that's always going to be there. It's going to be very hard in this asset class to know exactly what the hard ROI is. And that's where it's a little bit of that art form and really understanding and being a good operator where you can tell what's worth it and what's not to add to your property.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, I want to understand because you have a very good team, as you've mentioned earlier, very, very specialized, right? You have, your data team, you have your revenue team, you have your capital raising team, you have your property management team, like so many departments. Now, you're leading the acquisition side of that. I want to understand, how that plays into the entire equation, meaning, where in the deal source process do you step in personally, like as
Yeah.
acquisitions? Are you out there trying to find deals? Do you have more like partners that are sending deals your way? Maybe your data team does a preliminary underwriting and then sends over to you what seems to have some potential, or what does that process look like as far as, man, 130 properties in 2 years that you've acquired? I mean, you must have a very defined acquisition process.
Yeah, certainly. No, great question. So, how it starts is we're going to build a buy box for a given market. We're not just going to look at properties and be like, here's all these properties coming in from, Austin, Texas, Joshua Tree, California, Orlando, Florida. Like, if you're just broadly searching, you don't really know what the best product is. So for us, we want to first identify that market. Like I said, we start with regulation. Then we're going to start with what's the best product to own? What are the top performers? What do they look like? What part of town are they on? What amenities do they have? What do they look like on the outside? What's the bed and bath count? So once we've narrowed that down and we've kind of built that buy box for that given market, then we're just going to set up listing alerts, on Zillow, Redfin, whatever your favorite, listing service is. And we're going to wait for stuff to hit that's in our desired price range for that desired bedroom count in that desired buy box. And then from there, you can't do iBuying. I think Zillow and a lot of the groups showed us that iBuying gets you in trouble. You're always going to need that human element to see, can this work as a short-term rental? How's the flow of the house? Is it choppy? Is it open? Is there room in the backyard to add ABC amenity, miniature golf, a playground, hot tub, fire pit, etc.? So you're always going to need that human element to be able to capitalize on that. So for, me and my team, what we're doing is we're looking at all these new listings that are within our price range, in our buy box, in key target markets, which we have about 30 or so identified. Like I mentioned earlier, we're currently in 9 of them. but we're tracking about 30 that we would love to be in if obviously there was the right inventory and the right product to go into. Once we find that property that we like, we're going to reach out to a local realtor that we have a partnership with, somebody who has a knowledge and an understanding of short term rentals, not just a regular real estate agent. You want somebody who knows STRs. They want to, know the rules and regulations. They want to know the lay of the land. There's somebody who's familiar with working with investors because we're a lot different than the more emotional primary residence buyer. So once we get that partner, we like that property, we're going to go underwrite it. And so we're going to look at our underwriting model, look at comparable properties. So that's where the, going hand in hand with the data comes in. We're going to get our data set from the data team and be like, okay, comparable 4 bedrooms are generating between 120 and 140. So this property, do we think it's going to be closer to the 140 number because it's elite, or is it not quite as good and it's going to be closer to 120? So we're going to go through our underwriting. We're going to put our metrics in. We're going to test how much the deal can suffer. Can it still cash flow if revenue drops 30%? We're going to go beat it up and stay conservative, make sure things are good. If we like the deal at that point, from a number standpoint, we're going to talk to our realtor and we're going to get a video walkthrough. Obviously, photos can be deceiving and we're not local. So we want to get somebody to put eyes on it for us. And they're going to, video the outside. They're going to video the street. They're going to video the inside. There are eyes on the ground. They're talking to us about things they see. Hey, this soffit doesn't look great. Hey, there's these cracks in the foundation. Hey, this yard is sloped. You're going to see a lot more in a video than you are just from listing photos. After that video, we're either going to decide, yep, we're pushing forward on it. There was nothing alarming, or hey, the numbers looked good, but the video, the physical real estate itself was really scary. We're not going to pursue this deal. Assuming we're pursuing the deal, we'll come in, write an offer, negotiate with the seller, and then boom, we're under contract. So when you mentioned how does the flow, with the team, it really does start with, my department in acquisitions. And ultimately, once we do close on that property, it gets handed off to the next team, which is going to be construction and design. So the construction team is going to go in and, handle the physical renovations themselves, the flooring, the paint, the, whatever it might be. And you're going to also work hand in hand with the design team of like, okay, what's the design aesthetic? When we're picking the colors of the paint, picking the colors of the flooring, when we're deciding like, are we going to paint a mural? Are we going to add a wallpaper? Those two departments go hand in hand. So they're kind of working simultaneously. Once that
Mm-hmm.
house is renovated and designed, then it's going to get handed off to property management. And so ultimately property management is going to take over and handle the guest communication, the cleaning coordination, all of those things. And once that's going on and the listing's live, ultimately revenue management is going to be overseeing the day-to-day pricing, making sure the calendar's good, our booking strategy. Are we in peak season? Are we in off season? Do we need to adjust pricing? And for us, we're going to also look at things different than a common homeowner. The most important metric for us is profitability. And, we might look at, what our profitability is for that property for the month. And so when it comes to revenue management, we're going to approach it slightly different, where the homeowner might say, hey, I don't know that I want to take that $200 per night booking. We're going to look and say, hey, we've already achieved profitability. And, any expenses at this point are relatively negative. There's no more pretty much. So this booking is going to be nearly 100% to the bottom line. And we're going to make that decision more often than not to take that booking, because we're looking at profitability, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, I have a minimum standard I need to hit or things like that. Ultimately we have investors that we want to satisfy and make happy along with ourselves. And those are things that we're going to always strive for, is cash flow. And that's the most important metric. So it's just a little different than, the one-off investor who's potentially not looking at the operations the same way we are.
Yeah, that's more emotional. We work with a lot of property management companies and try to help them educate owners. And one of the things we try to tell them is, hey, explain them the difference between fixed costs, variable costs. Make sure they understand
Certainly.
that, your fixed costs, you're gonna have to pay for them regardless of whether, you get a booking or not. Whereas the variable cost is really that marginal cost of you getting that extra booking. If your booking, that you are getting is covering for that variable cost, whatever extra on top of that you can get is money you're getting to cover the fixed costs that you would have had to pay, regardless of whether you got that booking or not. So, what you said there is very interesting. If you've already achieved profitability, then anything on top of that, it goes straight to the bottom line, right?
Yeah,
Makes a
it's a
lot of
metric we
sense.
track. It's a metric we track very intimately, and it always changes. So we update every month, but we're taking the average of what is our operational cost for this property. So it's going to change every month, but what we try to hone in on is okay, on average over the last 6 months or the last 12 months, the last 18 months of this property's been live, on average, our operational cost per month is whatever, 3,800, 4,600, whatever it might be. So to your point, once you get above that, and so your booking strategy and your revenue and your pricing pre-profitability is going to be a lot different than post-profitability. And these are just nuanced things that the common investor, the common short-term rental owner are just not looking at. They're not understanding. I can guarantee they don't even track it. And
Mhm.
that's what really separates us from a performance standpoint. And when you typically look at our performance, what you see as a whole is the three key metrics. Here's what tends to happen on our performance compared to the market. Our ADR typically comes in slightly below our competition. Our occupancy is typically 40 to 60% higher than our competition. And then when you balance things out on a more, even keel, tracking, our RevPAR is typically 30 to 50% higher, which is obviously taking into account because ultimately revenue is made up of two things, occupancy and average daily rate. You can manipulate your occupancy by lowering your price or increasing your price. You can manipulate your ADR by, jacking up your occupancy or plummeting your occupancy. Ultimately, revenue is what you put in the bank account. That is the
Mhm.
only thing that matters. And it's kind of funny, and I'm sure you've heard it too. And you can tell immediately when somebody's a amateur rookie in this space, they're like, "Hey, what kind of occupancy do you project for this property?" And it's like, well, that's only half the equation. You just asked me for half of the feel. It's how much revenue does this property do? Because if you want 50% occupancy, I'll price it to get you 50% occupancy. If you want 100% occupancy, I'll rent your place for 49 bucks a night. Guess what? You'll be booked every freaking night. So it's really fascinating when you see the difference between an entry level and amateur, somebody who's just doing this on the side or it's a second home, and what we're doing at an institutional scale with these properties and our investors.
Yeah, it makes all the difference for sure. Now, quick question there when it comes to the operational expenses piece. Number one, as a percentage, right? As a percentage of revenue, what are you underwriting, right? As operational expenses as an average, more or less? And what is the actual percentage that you end up getting on the field, right? Because I'm sure there's a spread.
Yeah, so a lot to unpack here. So we are always underwriting for larger than our current OPEX naturally, because if things get worse, you want to account for it. When you look at a given property, and this is the thing about having a huge portfolio, a 2-bedroom that's 900 square feet versus a 5-bedroom 3,000 square feet are going to be completely different. Does this one have a pool? Does this one not? And so we're constantly looking at what's our portfolio blend. How many of those 5-bedroom, half-acre, swimming pool, 3,000 square foot homes do we have versus 2-bed, 900 square foot, that doesn't have a pool, or crazy things that are in there. Typically, as a whole, we're always aiming to be like, our ultimate goal at stabilization is to get at or below 35% from an OPEX perspective. Big goal when you have a massive portfolio and a blend like we do. The difference too is stabilized properties versus unstabilized properties. So when it first launches, you're having to still work out the kinks. Guests are telling you, hey, this is missing or this is wrong. We clearly update our SOPs with every new occurrence, but you still can't plan for everything. We've gotten better. We've definitely improved, but your OPEX is going to stabilize and get lower once you've been operating for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. Once you've really gotten that property kind of dialed in. And then same thing with the revenue. So OPEX is a percentage of revenue. Ultimately, if you're driving a, crap ton of revenue, you can also manipulate your OPEX lower because, hey, 30,000 in expenses on 100K in revenue is 30%, but on 120, you've just now made your OPEX spread lower. So it looks better, even though it's the same numerical dollars. So
Mhm.
ultimately, driving revenue can help control your OPEX. So for us, some of these properties, yeah, they've hit in the 40s or the mid 40s, low 40s. As a portfolio aggregate, depending on stabilized or unstabilized, we're really in that, upper 30s to low 40s range, and continuing to move it downward with, like I said, our ultimate North Star, our ultimate goal, once these properties are all stabilized in the portfolio, is to be at or below 35%. At that point, we'll be in really great shape for, cash flows, cash on cash return to our investors. Everybody's going to be very happy if we can hit those metrics. So that's
Mm,
ultimately what we're striving for.
man, what you just shared there is so valuable, so interesting as well. So I guess, yeah, when you're underwriting, you're trying to be more conservative. Maybe you're getting closer to, 50%, right?
Yeah, we're going to underwrite in the mid to upper 40s for sure, just to stay conservative. And then, hey, if we only hit 40, then you underwrote for 42 or 45, you're in great shape still. The number still pencils. If,
Mhm.
God forbid, expenses get out of hand and you are operating at 42 or 45% and you underwrote for it, well, your numbers don't, you're not shocked with your numbers. And, I'll use a baseball reference. I'm a washed up baseball guy for you. At a portfolio this size, we're not buying home runs every time. I wish every property was a home run. It's a combination of some singles, some doubles, some triples, and of course some home runs. The key for us, we just can't strike out, meaning we just can't buy stuff that runs in the red. And, knock on wood, fortunately, nothing is at that state. We haven't, quote unquote, struck out on a property. Do we have some that we would probably not buy again? If you showed me the numbers here, 6 months, 12 months, and it just didn't come out the way we thought it would. Yeah, absolutely. We probably have 10, 20% of the portfolio where it's like, hey, this is just a boring single. We probably wouldn't buy it again today with the knowledge we have, because ultimately we want to get more doubles, more triples, more home runs. But that's what happens at scale is, yeah, we're not going to be perfect. We're not only buying home runs. That's delusional and unrealistic. But when you blend it all together, that for us is the key. That's what the diversification is. That's what a lot of investors really prefer, is they're not all in on one property. It's not
Mhm.
one short-term rental and you better hope it goes really well, or hope it doesn't go really bad. The fortunate thing with a portfolio of our size is, if one property is not doing as well and it's, maybe a low single digit return, quote unquote, a single for the baseball terms, well, it's balanced out with a huge portfolio of these other triples and home runs that are doing double digit teen, level type returns.
Mhm.
And that's what a lot of investors like when they come invest with us is, hey, not only do I not have to do it myself, which is that's one whole conversation, but it's the diversification play. I get exposure to 9 different markets. I get different seasonality. I get different, opportunities. There's different product types. Hey, I partially own some 2 beds, some 3 beds, some 4s, 5s, and 6s. I'm not overexposed to one particular. We're in cabin markets, we're in beach markets, we're in downtown metropolitan markets. So again, you're adding layers of diversification, which is the strategic play of how we've built this portfolio and how we'll continue
Mhm.
to build it moving forward.
Love it. Now, when it comes to that 20% or so that with what you know today, you would not buy again, I'm curious to know when you're going through the process of, looking at new properties that you would potentially acquire. Let's say, everything seems to make sense. Everything looks good. Regulations are fine. Gross yield tends to make sense. The property seems to match your buying criteria. What is something that now that is a red flag, but a kind of like not a self-evident red flag, like a red flag you had to learn, you know, with mistakes that you
Yep.
now know and you say, hey, this property, maybe later in the process you eventually put a hold on moving forward there. What would that be?
Yeah, backyard size. If you've seen any of the stuff I put on social media, we're clearly all in on these amenities, these resorts. And yes, not every yard can you fit a 30 by 50 pickleball court. Like, that is obviously clearly reserved for massive. But being able to amenitize it with tons of things for families, groups, travelers to do, we've really seen it does make a big difference. And just put yourself in a guest perspective. If you're looking at 2 Airbnbs, similar price, similar location, similar reviews, this one has 2 amenities in the backyard. It has a fire pit and a hot tub. This one has 4 amenities, it has hot tub, fire pit, cornhole, and a playground,
Mhm.
9 times out of 10, you're going to book that one, all things being equal. So for us, we've just been limited with the physical real estate that there's just not enough opportunity. And
Mhm.
to provide some more color, I'll even give you a different strategy from a learning experience is where to spend our renovation dollars. Here's something we A/B tested, and it's bathroom renovations. So, like I told you again, we do not play in luxury. If you play in luxury, this does not apply to you. You actually have to deck out the bathrooms. But what we've learned is you do not need fully remodeled luxury bathrooms. They need to be clean, they need to be updated, and, obviously suffice. But we've gone in before to some of these places and, ripped out the vanity, gutted the shower, brand new white subway tile, accents, glass doors. And there's no boost in revenue because, again, we don't play in the luxury space. We're not traveling. Most of our customers are families, groups, people getting together, and they care more about the amenities than, well, this is a quote unquote, early 2000s bathroom. Is it clean? Yes. Is it nice? Yes. Is it brand new, modern, slick with, marble? No. But again, we're not in the luxury space, and that's not who our clientele is. So we've made that
Mhm.
mistake where we've over renovated bathrooms early on, that we're just not doing that today. And, yes, if the vanity needs updated or there's pink tile, well, yes, you do need to update it. There is a level of standard that you have to do. But if the bathroom is really quote unquote good, no, we're not going to spend that money anymore. So those are the mistakes, the two things I would point to that we've really learned from last year to this year as we've
Mm.
scaled, and we're just more efficient with our dollars.
Amazing. That's super valuable. Going back to the topic of underwriting, there's something we used to hear a lot, which I'm sure you also have heard. Before interest rates went up, people were saying, "Hey, underwrite the property as if it was a long-term rental, and if it doesn't pencil out as a long-term rental, don't move forward." Now, with interest rates that have increased, that 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 becomes more difficult, right? To say, hey, if it doesn't pencil out as a long-term rental, I won't move forward. Am I wrong? Is it still something you guys do as far as having that as a plan B or plan C type of thing? Or let's say, your plan A is that everything is going to be fine. Short-term rentals are going to be booming. Maybe after that, you can look at midterm rentals. You can look at, medical travel as as an alternative where you're still going to be earning more than just your traditional long-term rental, but it's say it's going to be less, right? And then worst case scenario, you put it up as a long-term rental. Is that even something that you look at? Is that even something that you consider, or you're really hoping that short-term rentals are going to keep booming and nothing's going to happen at the economy level that's going to affect travel as a whole?
So I'll give you a hot take. We do not subscribe to that thesis. I think it's highly overrated, and I'm happy to explain why. If you are only buying short-term rentals with the intent of them penciling as a long-term rental, first off, you're going to be highly limited to where you can invest, and typically you're going to be confided to the metropolitan areas. If you go look at, let's just take the panhandle of Florida vacation market, you take a Disney or a Joshua Tree, pick a vacation market. You could never buy a home to get your Airbnb investment started, your portfolio, because nothing would ever pencil as a long-term rental in that market.
Mhm.
Nothing would pencil as a midterm rental because, again, people aren't going to Disney for 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, whatever it is, and you wouldn't be able to generate enough. For us, what we've seen is people who get in trouble is you try to actually have two or three. Oh, I want to dip my toe in the short term rental bucket, but then also midterm and hedge to long term. And what happens is you're kind of like you're the jack of all trades. You're just not good at any of them. You're very average at all three. You need to be all in on your strategy. And if your strategy is midterm rentals, then you need to make sure you are buying and setting up the best possible way to appeal to traveling nurses, relocation families, whatever your midterm rental strategy is, hospitals, military bases. We are
Mhm.
all in, and we are specifically designed for short term rentals. Now, Does that not mean that we're not worried about a recession? Absolutely. Now, when you look though at past recessions and what's happened to hospitality, people don't stop traveling altogether. Now, the bottom 20% of the population, absolutely they do. But the affluent crowd, maybe instead of flying to Italy this year, they're going to go still take a vacation. Like transparently, rich people still travel. And, people who are quote unquote middle class, if they have some money, they will still travel. And a lot of people in their personal priorities will still book a trip and prioritize that over other things that will get cut first. Now, yes, the bottom half will cut it out. They just don't have a choice. And that's just the way it is. So for
Mhm.
us, we have a lot of these hedges. When you look strategically at some of our markets, coastal vacation in Florida, we have North Georgia mountains. Boom, you're a hour and a half drive from Atlanta. Those cabins we own, there's 7 million people that live in a 2-hour drive. So yeah, that family in Atlanta, they're not flying to Italy this year, but guess what? They want to get out of the city, get out of the concrete, get out of the traffic and go stay in a nice mountain view cabin with a movie theater, cornhole, hot tub, mountain views, nice, calm, cool weather. So that's always going to exist. And for us, because we're all in here, here's what happens in a recession. Maybe instead of awesome 500 a night when times are juicing that we're getting now, maybe it drops down to 400 a night. But you know what? We're still getting booked. That bottom of the barrel listing that's trying to hedge itself for a midterm and it's kind of a long term, they just don't get booked, period. And that's their biggest risk in a recession. It's not my ADR dropped 10%, my ADR dropped 20%. If you underwrote correctly, you should still cash flow with those drops in ADRs. And guess what? We still would. Your biggest risk is not getting booked, period. So it just goes back to that first scenario that I played is if we're in a recession and the customer is looking at two different Airbnbs and this one has 4 amenities in the backyard, this one has 2 amenities in the backyard, it's the same location, they're relatively the same price. Now, yes, maybe that price could be up, down, sideways, crooked, it doesn't matter. But ultimately, the one that has the better design, the better amenities is going to get booked. And for
Mhm.
us, that is still cash flow, whether it is only 400 a night. And last year we were getting 500 a night per se. So yeah, I take a
Mhm.
completely different approach to that strategy. I think it's actually highly overrated. And the second part is that strategy mostly only works in metropolitans where you have the
Mhm.
largest risk of regulation and issues in your portfolio. So it's funny. I roll my eyes at it. I do believe it's a lot of quote unquote amateur thinking to think, well, I'm only going to hedge it that way. You can't, there is no hedge. You can hedge in this asset class multiple different ways, like we talked about diversification, high design, out amenitizing your competition, owning in multiple locations, cross comparing seasonality, having something in the beach, having something in the mountains. There's so many ways to diversify within short term rentals, but if you're trying to make this a multiple real estate hedge, you can get yourself
Mhm.
in far more trouble, is what we've seen.
That's man, that's so interesting, and you explained it so well. It is true though that that strategy only seems to work in cities, right? And indeed, there's a risk of regulation, and there's the risk of, as you said, not being good at anything and being too spread out. Love it. Now, when it comes to hedging, right? On the underwriting, and I keep
Yeah.
talking about this because I think it's so important, right? That underwriting process is so important. We already talk about the OPEX, the operational costs underwriting, where you aim to be at mid 40s, right? But with a star goal of being at 35%. What about the revenue? So say you look at the revenue and you're like, this is what I think we're going to be at, like realistically. How much under that, how much under that do you go in your underwriting? How much under the realistic assumption?
So actually, really, really blow your mind. We actually don't underwrite for the top end of the performance. We actually underwrite for the downside protection. Because if we can tolerate the downside protection, so if it hits certain downside metrics that we're okay with, we're going to buy the deal. Because if it hits the top of the market, guess what? Like, oh, it's a 12 cash on cash or a 15. Like, of course you would buy that deal all day. So you don't need to underwrite to that. But what you need to see is what is the downside. So kind of like different than the common investor, we actually underwrite for the downside of revenue. We don't underwrite for the top side of revenue. Because if we hit the
Mhm.
top side, guess what? It's going to pencil. We're going to buy it. If I offer this deal to anybody in America who had the capital to put the down payment in, they would buy it too. But if I showed the downside, that's where we're going to look at it. So for us, we're going to build our comparables with our data set. So again, let's just say, hey, we're buying a 4-bed, 3-bath. It's got a pool. It's in coastal Florida. We're going to go look at all of the comparable properties that are in that area, have the same amenities, they're in the same location, and we're going to put all of those together in a revenue chart. So this is kind of like our data comp set. If the highest one is 150, like, okay, that's quote unquote top of revenue market. And let's say the worst one in that group of 5 or group of 10, because again, depending on how many comps, that's typically what we're seeing in our comp set. Let's say the bottom one is 110. So we're like, okay, if worst case, we're just even though we know we outperform the market by 30%, like we never underwrite for that. We're like, man, if we fall flat on our face and we can only be as good as this 110 guy, and you got all these 9 other listings doing 115, 130, 135, 142, and then the top guy doing 150, we're going to underwrite for 110 and say, okay,
Mhm.
if we only do that, can we swallow and tolerate that return? Now that
Mhm.
return can't be a zero. You can't have, we can't underwrite for downside zero. There still needs to be some meat. Now, is it going to be an investment return that we're going to be happy with and the investors will? No, probably not. It's still a return, but we have minimum thresholds for each market. And that's a kind of a
Mhm.
balance of appreciation and risk. So obviously if it's a more higher risk market from like a demand standpoint or a seasonality standpoint, you're going to want to have a higher minimum threshold. If it is, like, just speaking transparently, if it is a Florida market, which is high appreciation, high demand, your tolerance on the bottom is probably a little lower than some of your other traditional markets. So for us, we kind of have that threshold that we're willing to take in any given market, which we know, and we're going to underwrite to that bottom. So yeah, like completely different than a lot of other people, because if I underwrote that deal at 150, you and I both know it's going to pencil. It's going to be double digit
Mhm.
return. We're going to buy that all day. But what I need to see is what's the bottom. Can it still pencil at that 110? Now, if you get a really tight spread, say the top performer is 150 and the bottom is 125, well, now you underwrite that 125. You're like, oh shoot, like this is great. But that 110 might kill the deal. And so that's where you have to look at is like, hey, if I only underwrote for 150 because same scenario, that's the top of market. In scenario A, I don't buy the deal. Scenario B, I do. So if you never look at what your downside risk is, that's where a lot of people get in trouble. Because we are an institution, because we have investor partners who are trusting us with their capital, we have to look at those things that the common investor isn't. But I
Mhm.
would personally argue that if it's my own money, I would want to be looking at what my downside risk is too, versus only looking at what it could do. And everybody only talks about what it could do on social media. 20 cash on cash, 30 cash on cash, like great. What happens if you perform at the bottom level? Because not everybody is performing at the top of market. As much as everybody wants to underwrite it on social media, not everybody is at the top of market. So you need to figure out what the downside risk really is and can you swallow it? So I look at things completely different from an underwriting perspective.
Extremely great point. Now, question there. So you're looking at the bottom from your list of comparables, right? Now, are you looking at comparables based on the property as it is when you're acquiring it, or are you looking at comparables based on what you know it's going to look like and the amenities you know it's going to have
Yep,
after you've
exactly. Yeah,
renovated?
once it's fixed up, yeah. So
Yeah,
obviously
okay,
we
that
want to
makes
make
sense. That makes sense
a
because
fair
otherwise
apples to
it's a
apples
fixer upper.
comparison.
So
Yeah, we want to
sure,
make a
sure,
fair
sure.
apples to apples. So we're only comparing for what we plan on doing. If we plan on adding a game room, we're only going to look at 4 bedrooms with game rooms and pools that would
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
align. Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Now, what about the capital stack that you guys are looking at? How much of what you're looking at is debt versus actual equity from partners and investors versus your own capital from let's say
Yep.
proceeds and cash flow from other deals? Like what does the cap stack look like on a traditional deal for you guys?
Yeah, great question. So we are taking out a debt on each property. We're typically coming in that 72 to 75 LTV. All of our debt is fixed for 10 or 30 years. So super critical right now. You see a big issue in multifamily is a lot of people in 2020 and 2021, they took floating rate debt, they took bridge debt, and now all of a sudden they're in trouble. And for
Hmm.
us, that risk wasn't worth it. Could we have juiced our returns had we taken 5 year, 3 year, 1 year fixed rate debt? Absolutely.
Hmm.
But to us, that would have been, greedy. That would have been risky. That would not have been the responsible thing to do. We stayed conservative. All of our debt is either 10 or 30 years fixed so that we're never going to be a forced seller. And so that's what we're looking at. With that fixed rate debt, too, it also allows us to keep things in line and understand what are those fixed costs versus variable. And we look at like how's our leverage perspective. Our DSCR typically floats between 2.5 and 2.8. So if anything, we could take on more leverage. It's not, nobody's granting it from a lending perspective. But yeah, that's
Hmm.
typically what we're doing is we're coming in right around 72 to 75 LTV on a given property. So we're going to put 25 to 30% down. The debt's going to be fixed for 10 or 30 years. All of the renovations and amenities and all the value add is actually out of pocket. So we don't finance that or bridge. So that's our going in LTV. But if you actually go look at our actual, it's probably closer to like a 60. So we do have a lot of equity in these properties that's unrealized, which is a nice hedge as well from a diversification standpoint. On paper, we have the going in LTV, but once you add all the flooring, fix up the bathrooms, add the paint, add the hot tub, and you do a lot of the value add, that's unrealized because we pay for that out of pocket. We just don't think the risk of taking bridge debt or again any short-term debt, you
Hmm.
could get in trouble. We saw how quickly interest rates rose over the last couple of years. Our average renovation is like 2 to 3 months, which is still like very good compared to the market. But interest rates could rise and get out of hand from you over the course of 2 months, 3 months. God forbid we experience a delay on that project. And had we secured debt on the front end, maybe it was 6, now all of a sudden it's 7. So for us, that risk isn't worth it. And that's why we're just going to pay for all of the value add and renovations out of pocket. So that,
Hmm.
that's going to obviously use up more equity. But for us, that gives us assurance. We have a lot of equity in the deals of themselves as well. We always set aside reserves. So we typically hold about 5 to 6% of investor equity in reserves. So we can more than cover debt service for, pretty much over a year if we had to in a downturn. So there's so many, again, I continue to talk about those layers of diversification to de-risk it. And that's something that we want to always provide to our investors is, hey, they are trusting us with their capital. We're forever grateful and appreciative. For us, that comes with a responsibility to not take on excessive risk. And that's just not something we're willing to compromise on.
Wow, huge. Makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious to know when you are looking at year versus 30-year fix, when are you gonna go with 10 versus 30? I mean, what?
If the spread is attractive enough, so if we could save half a point or more, then it starts to make sense. If let's put some round numbers. If 30 year is at 7 and 10 year fixed is at 6.25, well that's going to matter. If they're within a quarter point or so, we're not gonna. It's not worth it. We'll just take the 30 year. Once you start getting a half point or more, the return profile it starts to be of some significance. So that's when we would take it. Lately 30 year fixed has been like pretty much the same. Like everything with lending, it goes in cycles. So there was a time where 10 year was very attractive. So we took a lot of 10 year fixed rate debt. And again, we're
Hmm.
going to target 5 year hold. So that gives us more or less just a 5 year insurance policy. So plenty of time. Like I
Hmm.
said, people have thrown 7 year, 5 year, 3 year fixed rate debt our way. It's just, and those are all cheaper than 10 year and cheaper than 30 year. Yeah, you could juice returns, just not worth it for us. We just don't take on that excessive risk.
And in terms of exit strategies, of course, the bigger exit strategy here is, let's buy single family based on comparables, let's sell at a portfolio level based on cap rates. But, people talk about having multiple exit strategies, right?
Yeah.
Within your 5-year holding period, are you looking at refinancing along the way? Is that something you guys do?
So if it became attractive, we would definitely pursue that and that would shift the strategy. But here's the thing. We're not economists. We don't predict interest rates. If so, we would be trading options and futures. We wouldn't be in the real estate space if we knew which way rates were going to go. But yeah, if rates go back to extremely low levels, refinancing the portfolio would become a very attractive option. And we would, of course, pursue that. So if that's there, we'll do it. But we do have multiple exit strategies. The first one is the most obvious, and that's to sell the entire portfolio to one large institution. So we're at 130 today. We've talked to a lot of those institutions that you could probably, rip off right now, all the famous ones that are in the headlines, good, bad, or indifferent. And typically what we're going to see is it's a number of doors, or it's a how big the check can be. We're talking, probably north of 500 short-term rentals before this is going to look really attractive. So for us, we're going to keep building over the next 3 to 5 years. We'll get up to that level. Then we'll have a portfolio attractive enough. At the same token, if the most profitable endeavor is to chop up the portfolio and sell it. So let's just say, for example, we've got 75 short-term rentals in Florida, and there's a large Florida-based family office that wants exposure. These properties are all renovated. They're all stabilized. They all have a 5-year rental history. If it's more profitable to just piece the portfolio off, that we're going to pursue that option as well. We could sell all the Arizona properties in Phoenix or Scottsdale to this group. Oh, we have this Northeast section. Oh, we have a Mid-Atlantic section, Southeast Mountains. We would pursue that. And as painstaking as it is, if the most profitable exit was to sell these one at a time as turnkey, proven short-term rentals to any retail investor, because you know what we're seeing? Every single person wants their own turnkey cash flowing short-term rental. Every single person wants one. So if we need to pursue the retail market and sell them one at a time, we absolutely would. So that's kind of how the different hedges we look at from an exit perspective is, hey, refinance, that's if rates go, super low again, we'll pursue that. You have one big exit to a large institution. You can chop the portfolio up, or you can sell it one at a time. We're going to ultimately do the most profitable endeavor because that's what's best for both us and our investors.
Man, Tyler, I could go on here for hours, believe me, because this has been so insightful and so good. We're running up here on time, but I just want to, end with, you telling potential people out there that might want to learn more about TechVestor, what that would look like in terms of, if they wanted to learn more, if they wanted to participate in some capacity in some of your projects, some of your deals, some of your funds. I know you've had funds open in the past for everyone. I know you have, other ones that are for, qualified investors only. What can you tell, people out there that might want to learn more and explore the possibility of joining this interesting adventure you guys are on?
Yeah, no, I mean, certainly people can go to techvestor.com. Feel free to book a call with our team. We have people ready to answer your questions, show you the performance history, any questions you might want to know. Currently we're only able to accept accredited investor capital. So as far as, what capital we're allowed to take in. But yeah, we're always taking on new investors. So if you'd like to, diversify your own personal holdings, we do quarterly dividends, huge tax advantages that come with owning real estate, the diversification play, the cash flows that you get. Definitely we're always open to taking on new investors to continue to grow our portfolio. So feel free to go to techvestor.com. If you want to book a time with our team, there's a calendar link right on there. Somebody from our team will be able to, walk you through, answer all your questions. So that way you can really learn all the details about the investment opportunity.
Sounds good, Tyler. And final question, just to wrap up, 2024, when you look ahead, what are you excited about? What are you, what's ahead for you personally and for TechVestor as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, we're really excited. We've built this great team. There's so many opportunities now that come your way when you get our team. So for us, we're really excited to just continue to see what new doors open, how we can continue to build. We kind of have to pinch ourselves. We're only 2 years into this. Yes, it's been 130 properties in 2 years, but in the grand scheme of things, when you take a step back, we're only 2 years old. Continuing to evolve, continue to get more efficient. Really excited to see the growth of the portfolio once stabilization kicks in. We're already seeing huge changes from year 1 to year 2. Our year 1 revenue per property was averaging about 135. Year 2, it's 170. So we're just seeing performance, a lot of that too. We're buying more efficient product because the data is better. So I'm really excited to see here, now that we come into year 3, where can we push that upper end of the limit? We're getting more operationally efficient. We're buying higher revenue property. Our data is better. Our performance is better. So just really excited to see all the changes that we've made come together and really excited to see where it goes.
Amazing, amazing, Tyler. Thanks so much for taking the time for joining. Great, great conversation. Again, I could stay here for hours and hours. We'll make sure to do another one later because I'm sure there's so much to cover, and I'm excited to see how you guys continue to grow and continue to succeed.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
All right, have a good one.
Bye bye.